And yeah, so Sneha, you can, I think, start whenever you like and like introduce yourself and all.
Okay, so hi guys, thank you for being here today. And my name is Sneha Manepalli. I'm the North Carolina chapter lead for Girls in AI. And we really appreciate you guys being here today and being able to talk to high school students. Um, and I just want to open the floor if all of you guys just want to introduce yourselves, so the audience and attendees can know. Would any of you like to go first or?
I can start. My name is Bhavana. I'm a third year medical student at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. I went to Rice University for my undergrad, and I was part of like the 8-year BSMD program. I'm from Fremont. I went to American High School. So I'm really excited to be here and talk to you all today.
I can go next. Yeah. Hi everyone. My name is Siri. I mean, I just go by Siri. I am a research scientist in immunology at Stanford University. So I did my PhD in material science at Washington University in St. Louis. And before that, I did my bachelor's back in India in NIT Warangal. So I'm really excited to talk with the high school students and, share my experiences.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yep.
And I'll go last. Hey everyone, my name is Shravya. I am a second year medical student at Columbia. Prior, I was actually going off of Sneha's talk. I was at Stanford and I studied both computer science and interdisciplinary major of anthropology, human rights, and biology. Did a lot of work on actually using NLP and AI in gender-based violence research in Eastern Kenya and in India. And then worked at Meta for a couple of years on their health team. And then now I'm at Columbia. So excited to be here.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you guys for the introductions. And we kind of have like a few questions to go off of, and then there'll also be a Q&A session for the attendees to kind of ask questions. So one big thing was, what has motivated you guys to get involved in the field of medicine? And is there any like personal experience related to this, or like what was the motivation between like actually committing to something that's like almost like 8 to 10 years? Any of you like to start?
I'm
Oh, go for it.
No, I was gonna say I'm like a little tangential to medicine, so both of you guys go ahead first.
Okay, I can go. I have always kind of been interested in medicine. I was from a very young age, primarily because I love the aspect of patient care, working one-on-one with patients. I have explored a lot of different roles because of how long medicine takes, and I'm not a super fan of like all the parts of medicine. Like I don't love like the systems involved in medicine, like the payment models associated with medicine and things like that. But I think through exploring a lot of different fields, there was just nothing that gave me the same feeling that patient care gave me. So I think that's what motivates me to this day, and that's what made it worth it to pursue the field down the line.
That's interesting.
So for me, I didn't really have an interest in medicine when I was younger. It was kind of something that started in high school. I had a few sports injuries in high school, and kind of that was my first experience with sports medicine due to my surgeries and some like rehab after. And that's kind of what prompted me into thinking about a career in medicine. And then later, at the end of high school, I took more biology classes. I did research, shadowed some of the things that you all may be doing already, and that confirmed my desire to go into medicine. And so far, I've been enjoying it. And also echo everything Shravya said. There's a lot of things that are difficult, and maybe not a fan of some of the challenges of medicine, but overall, I feel like it's been a really good experience for me and definitely a career that I'm happy I stuck with.
Right, for sure.
Okay, so in my case, actually, I was never really interested in medicine. And I still don't know like how I feel about like, patient care in general. But so I actually started off with an engineering degree. So I did like a metallurgical engineering degree. So I didn't even think about, going into medicine eventually. But basically in my PhD, I started working with more nanotechnology, and then I got into nanomedicine research, which was mostly like, chemistry and not as much to do with, biology. But then I kind of started working with nanomedicine, and then the field of immunology picked up so much so that my research kind of drove me to immunology, and then I started working with cancer immunology and anti-tumor immunity. So it's a lot of like, basically I ended up in medicine because that's where my research took me. So that's how I see it. But I do still see the value of like a traditional medicine degree, but at the same time you could also approach it from like a pure science point of view, and get excited by just the actually vast depth of like the biology, and kind of enjoy it, and figure out what you want to do from there.
Right. I honestly really like those insights, because I feel like as high school students, one thing is like people usually just think, oh, there's one traditional path to medicine, and then like, they have to be committed to that or not. And that kind of scares people away. But knowing that there's other opportunities, especially now within the field, is really interesting.
Yeah.
So one other thing is like, how do you guys balance the lifestyle that the career itself requires, and what kind of struggles did you have to face?
I can take a try at that question. I think that right now I'm in the middle kind of my third year of medical school, so I have almost a year left. And I can say that so far, it has been pretty challenging. Right now, the third year and fourth year of medical school is traditionally called rotations. So you're spending a month or two in different specialties. OBGYN, surgery, internal medicine, pediatrics. It's different in different schools as well. And something that is challenging about it is the hours are tough. Sometimes on surgery, you start rounding or OR cases at 5:30, 6:30 in the morning. You work night shifts, you work weekends. And that's not just for a medical career, it happens for nurses and also people outside of medicine too. But it's a little bit physically draining. The second thing I found challenging about medical school is that the amount of information you have to learn in a very short period of time is overwhelming. Some of the stuff in preclinical, which is usually the first 2 years of medical school, which is different blocks like cardiology, gastroenterology, renal, and you have exams almost like every 3 weeks, every month, you're learning a whole field. And you also are expected to score high on these exams and pass, and then do step 1, step 2, step 3. So it's intellectually demanding. And then the final thing is on rotations, it's just 1 year experience I have working in the hospital. So I'm sure the actual doctors can speak to it better than me. But it is also emotionally challenging. A lot of the stuff you see until you're in the OR with serious like cases, or you work in hospice, you see in OBGYN where I just worked, we saw a lot of babies pass away, mothers pass away. So these are things you're exposed to as a student that have a much more visceral feeling while you're actually working in the hospital. And so those are some of the challenging things personally for me. But I will say that it scared me going into medical school, but now that I'm almost done with it, I have found a lot of ways personally to be able to balance it. I still play all the sports I've been playing since high school. I hang out with my friends a lot. I don't live in Fremont with my family, but I still try to go home often and talk to my parents and my brother as much as possible. So I became better at scheduling specifically time for those personal things, and also learning how to control or find ways to deal with difficult emotions or not performing well in school. So I think over time you build up ways to do it. So my biggest advice would just be like kind of be aware of what you're getting into, and if that's something you still choose to pursue, then don't be scared about it. You will find ways to cope with it and balance a life around it.
Yeah, I think echoing off things that Bhavana said, I think the other thing that is a little bit different being in medical school, I think one of the things that she said, which I think is right, is that like every career might be extremely demanding. And I think there were times as even an engineer, I was working weekends and working 80-hour weeks or 90-hour weeks. I think the thing that is different is like you have to also accept the fact that you'll be a student for like well into your 20s and 30s. And at the same time, like your friends might be like establishing their life, buying a house, having kids, like those kind of things, which like you will always be a little bit behind in that aspect. I mean, not necessarily always. Like I think there are people who manage to still juggle those things with medical school, but it is different in the fact that like you are a student and you're not making money during this period of time. So your life is a little bit delayed in that aspect. I think for me, I've also learned that there's different levels of like how much you want to give to the field. Like the field will take everything out of you if you want it to. It doesn't have to. And yeah, I think that goes for like emotionally, physically, mentally, like all those different aspects. I am someone who tends to give more of myself to the things that I do, and making sure that I get more education. So I think I have to set boundaries to like not get too sucked in and make sure that like I'm planning time and scheduling my time well. And that's something that I've been thinking a lot because I start on rotations in a couple of months. So I think that's the same thing that Bhavana was talking about is the things that I'm thinking about of like how I'm going to balance time and the lifestyle. But I think the thing I've learned is like if I want to give it more, there will always be time to give it more. And it's more of like a personal mentality of like what do you balance in your life and what are your priorities?
Yeah, I do agree with what Bhavana and Shravya, both of you said. I do think that in research though, it's like almost like a different lifestyle. I would put it because I I have seen a lot of people juggle with, working in the lab versus, having I don't want to say having a life, but trying to figure out what they want to do versus, spending more time in lab. It definitely helps to spend more time in the lab, like, just because getting a PhD can be difficult. But at the same time, I also think that it's something that you have to choose knowing what it is. So I often tell, like I've had the chance to mentor like high school students as well as undergrad students, and I often tell them it helps if you want to like, take a break here and figure out if you want to do a PhD or if you want to, follow someone and, figure out if you want to do an MD degree, because unless you experience like the life in the lab, you won't know if that's what you want to do. And if you don't really want to do it, you're going to struggle in terms of, the timing and, the career choice that you make. So it's always a good thing to like figure out what you want to know before you make that choice as a career. But I also do think that, if you do want to, have this professional experience of like working in the lab, you are going to make the choice of, spending more time in the lab, but you're not going to feel bad about it. So it's something that you have to figure out if you want to do as a choice or not.
So yeah, like kind of going off of that, like I know like some of you guys have mentioned like, being in the BSMD program, and then for some it's more on like the research side. So do you think that, I guess, even if it was a traditional career path, that research or like working in labs helps specifically like with your specialty, or like has it opened different career options?
Yeah, in high school, the first I guess extracurricular medically I did was research at a university lab, and particularly I did bioengineering research, which coincidentally enough is still my area of focus in research. but it really interested me because I found the area of medicine that I liked, and I also was still, as they were mentioning, like research as is you can find a medical niche in research as well as pursue an MD. But what I personally chose to go the MD route is because I wanted to interact with patients. I wanted to do procedural cases on patients. And I felt that while research was interesting, going through an MD path would give me the option to maybe later in my life I do focus on research, but I wanted to get a chance to be a doctor first. But I do think that research really did help me learn more about biology, learn about my areas of interest, even in medicine. And yeah, I made a lot of friends too through research labs.
I can speak next to that. I am actually someone who doesn't like research at all, and I I always was very resistant to the idea of like doing research to check off a box to get into medical school. So I didn't. I've never done biomedical research to this point. I like I said, like research that I have done is like I like lived in India for a long time, in Gujarat and Uttar Pradesh doing gender-based violence research out of slums. I'm really interested in like anthropology, and that's like led me to a career in working on health inequities. And I don't do like biomedical research by any means, but I do research in the sense of like I'm right now writing a textbook on health equity. I work a lot in prison populations and in like incarceration law. So my research has allowed me to pursue more things at the intersection of like legal systems, health equity, things like that. But I say that to also know that like I think going into medicine, I always thought like you had to do research to be able to get into medicine, and that just was not true. And I was able to actually do something I was genuinely interested in, and everything I put in my application to medical school substantiated that, and people were equally fine with me even if I didn't have any medical research per se, or biomedical research.
Yeah, in my case, like I said earlier, I do have like a lot of research experience, but that's through my PhD and my postdoc. And I mean, I also see like if you guys are not aware, but there's also a program known as an MD PhD. So there are a lot of people at Stanford, at least, that go through an MD PhD, which is like a 9-year degree that you do after your bachelor's. So it's also something that I've seen people go through as an alternative to do an only a MD degree. So the difference is that after the 9 years, you still do a residency, and you also, you know, can go into academic medicine. In most cases, you have your own lab, but you also attend patients on the side. So that's also like a little unconventional, I think, but at the same time, you have to commit to, you know, spending 9 years plus residency, and then, you know, going through fellowships and then having your own lab. So it's a longer path, but if you're really interested in academic medicine, that's something that I've seen people do. And one other thing I do want to point out is there are also things that in research, for example, in cancer research, I've seen like postdocs that work with patient samples versus, you know, working with animal models. So you do get the option of what you're choosing. I mean, it can be psychologically draining if you're working in cancer research and if you're dealing with patients, and if you know that, you know, I've seen labs where some of the patients are brought to the lab, and, you know, if you know that the person's not going to live for long, and, you know, working on that kind of research can be draining. So you have the option to choose what specific field you want to go, and not necessarily only, you know, focus on things that could be draining. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I really appreciate like those kind of perspectives, because I feel like as a high school student myself, like people are really like driven by the passion they have right now and what they see like as a traditional path. But knowing that, like, again, like you guys said, some of you, that like, you know, it doesn't have to be specifically like patient care or research. Like there's still ways to get to that same point or whatever that end goal is without, I guess, following like a traditional path. And then one other question was, I guess, what is your guys' opinion as I guess at least like based on the path that you guys have taken in, I guess, investing in good undergraduate education, because a lot of people like here are also like high schoolers. So like if you're having like a long-term like PhD, MD goal in mind, how valuable do you see like investing in a good undergraduate education?
I could speak to that. I think something that we've already talked about a little bit is ensuring that you're trying out careers that you're aiming towards. I think something that I see a lot with people who go into their PhDs or medical school is like they just imagined it would be something and they think it's right for them. And that's what often leads to burnout, or it becomes really difficult if you don't truly know what you're getting into and you don't really feel the passion from yourself. So I would say like regardless of the option that you choose, like making sure that you're starting to ask yourself the questions of like, what am I genuinely interested in? Can I see myself doing this for a long time? Am I motivated by this working structure or style? Is really important. And I think the things that I did in undergrad that meant the most to me were things that helped me answer those questions. So like making sure I was making time to figure out what would my interest be down the line, and not just like, here are the boxes to get to medical school. And then once I get there, be like, okay, now what am I going to do with this kind of thing? And in terms of like BSMD or traditional career paths, I personally am someone who like, even though I have wanted to go to medical school since I was like 7 years old, my interest in that has like changed and evolved over time quite significantly. And in undergrad, I actually used it to not just study biology, because I was like, I'll study biology a ton in medical school, but make sure that like this is the thing that I want to do, like I said, and explore a little bit, build in more things into what I thought medicine should be like. And that for me was more like social determinants of health and things like that, as well as like educating myself in technology. So I think for me, it was important to be able to explore that and do more of a traditional, non-traditional career path, because I also took a few years in between. But that's how I thought about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Shravya said. I think if you kind of jump into programs without knowing what it entails, I think you could be burnt out from like just all the pressure of it. So yeah, I mean, unless you're really sure that you want to do an MD degree, I wouldn't like really, pursue an BSMD degree. But one other thing that people often do is basically take a couple of years of break year and, figure out if you really want to do patient care versus research. Or there's also a lot of opportunity in biotech consulting that, a lot of pre-med students end up doing. That's one of the things. And a little unconventional thing that I've also seen people do is after their PhD, at least in California, a lot of people get into patent law, because you get into a lot of research and you have this opportunity to know, what's going on. That's the current technology in terms of what's new and what's not. So you get into patent law because you don't actually have to do a JD degree after you do a PhD. And this is kind of unconventional, but I've seen people do it. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So there's just no one way to doing, either medicine or biotech or any of the research career paths, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I personally went the BSMD route, so I can talk a little bit about why I did at 18 and now how I feel about it at 24. And the reason I went into it in high school, my perspective was that I knew I was pretty interested in medicine. And, but of course, I wasn't 100%. And I don't think realistically, as much as you think you're sure in high school, it will change in some way. Maybe you will end up choosing medicine at the end, but how you kind of ebb and flow throughout college. So my perspective was I wanted to choose a BSMD program because that would guarantee I get into med school, but I didn't want to be held to the decision. So the BSMD program I got into, I would be able to leave at any point without any repercussions. It wasn't binding. I can quit in college, say I don't want to be pre-med anymore, or even before, I can get my BS in whatever I wanted, and then say I don't want to go to med school anymore. So that was one thing that I particularly was interested in. Secondly, my perspective in high school was that I also didn't find much of an interest for kind of traditional medical research, traditional, I guess some of the activities that a lot of my friends were doing. I had a different interest in like health analytics, business, bioengineering that is kind of ancillary to medicine. So I wanted to make sure that I got into med school at the end, but would have this time since I'm not too focused on my GPA, checking boxes for research, having to do MCAT, that I would get the time to do a lot of opportunities that I found would be difficult as a pre-med. I studied abroad for 8 months in London. Every summer, I was not doing traditional research. I picked different things I wanted to do. Even in college, I also studied business. I did policy research, a lot of activities that personally, I don't know if I would have been able to handle. Granted that I did the pre-med path, of course you can, but that was my perspective in high school. And now at like a third year of medical school, for me, I personally am very happy I made that decision because I picked a med school that was good. I was able to have a lot of time in college and have a bit less stress getting into medical school comparatively. And I also knew that at any point I could leave and say I don't want to do medicine, but I still ended up coming to that decision on my own later and confirming it. And then also in my medical school here, I have a lot of ties still to my college. Like I do a lot of longitudinal experiences that I started the first day of college that I'm still participating in now in terms of research and all that stuff. And I'm friends with the seniors. I have a lot of contacts here. So it helped me build a network in medical school from undergrad. But I will say, I agree with everyone in that you shouldn't rush into a program just so you can get your MD in 6 years or 7 years, or because there are things you have to think about that you're living in that location for 8 years. So while it might be exciting your freshman year of college, will it still be the place you want to be as a 24-year-old? Initially, you may be interested in certain volunteering and these opportunities, but will you still be kind of interested in that 6, 7 years later? And does that place hold those opportunities for you? And then also, I was really passionate about getting experiences, as I mentioned, in policy, sports medicine, study abroad. And my undergrad offered those opportunities, even though I'm part of a BSMD program. And not all programs allow that. I could major in whatever I wanted. I had freedom. So if you are also interested in that path, you should make sure that whatever program you apply to also has all this in place, that it's not binding, that you have the freedom to pursue your major, and eventually if you choose to go to the med school, that you're happy with that associated med school.
Yeah, no, I feel like the perspectives are really inspiring, especially like, showing your commitment, but also like dedication to the field you choose. And kind of like hinting off of like how you guys mentioned, like, being in different locations, like I guess from high school or undergrad, like even living like in India and then coming here. How is that kind of like learning experience? Like, is it different, like from what you expected? And is it like hard or easier to adjust, especially like in a place that's like, you're again surrounded by the same like high achieving individuals?
Yeah, I can start with that. So for me, moving from India to WashU was culturally challenging, definitely, but also it was just the only thing that I could deal with was honestly the fact that there was a lot of international students, so that really helped me in terms of feeling in place. And the other thing about being at WashU was also because the school itself was very small. And I had the you know, there were like 6 students in my cohort, so it was not really like, you know, I had the attention of all the faculty members, so it was really nice to, you know, be kind of in a smaller school in terms of that. But then from WashU to Stanford, it was definitely different, because Stanford being, you know, just bigger in terms of research, you kind of tend to get lost in terms of, you know, sure, you got another paper, so there's nothing different about it. So there's just so many overachieving people, so it's like a lot more stressful. So that's something to keep in mind as well, in terms of like, you know, where you end up being. And, you know, it helps in terms of figuring out what you want to do, and then the place that you want to go to based on that.
I can also speak about that from on a much smaller scale, moving around in the US a bunch. I think something I've learned is I do enjoy getting to experience a diversity of different places. I think going to Stanford for undergrad was wonderful, and the fact that I was able to take advantage of like the tech environment there, the nature there. I was at the beach like every other weekend, and I just really took advantage of like exploring things that I didn't otherwise get to see, having come from Texas. And then moving to New York for medical school, I think has also been a pretty stark difference. I think some of the things that people talked about are like also just finding your community and exploring the different opportunities that are there. New York has a really interesting political climate. So I think I've been really focused on just like what are the new things that I can learn from the places that I go and the cultural differences that are here. And I think, yeah, while I don't think I'm going to settle here by any means down the line, like I think Stanford is, or like the Bay Area is definitely where I would like to go back to at some point. I don't think I would have known that if I hadn't moved around a little bit more and explored what there was.
Would you like to go, Bhavana?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm from Fremont. I had lived there my whole life. And then for undergrad, I moved to Rice, which is in Houston, and I've been there for now 6 years. So I agree. It's been interesting moving because I went out of state also for college, and it's a little different because all my friends went to UCs, and my family's there. So I kind of had to make all new friends here, a new community. And also, as you go on, like med school gets challenging, but your family's not here, and you don't kind of have the same support. But you get to meet a lot of different people, and you get to understand different environments living by yourself. So you can confirm now going forward, like when I apply to residency, I have a much better idea of where I want to go and what kind of environment I want to settle in. And I wouldn't have known with that kind of clarity personally if I stayed in the same area.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess from like a perspective of like program like perspective from like either like med school or like, you know, PhD programs, like how do you think like what like do you guys have any like strategies for like, you know, managing those processes? Because like a lot of people like are also like, you know, in high school, college, like thinking about that like in the long term or like even now, I guess.
I will say, speaking more to like the high school to college jump, because I think that's a lot more relevant to y'all right now. Probably one of the biggest things is just asking people who have been there and like being like, what is it actually like to be a student at these different places? I think that's how you'll hear about the things that all of us talked about the variations in different places. So trying to find older students and talking to them about like how their college experience was, what was it like? What did they like? What did they not like is probably helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Also helpful to if someone from your same high school or from your city made the jump to that university, they may be having a more similar experience as to how it was going there. to a certain degree, as much as you talk and kind of plan out your major and all these things, you have to make a gut instinct just jump on where you feel like is the best decision for you now. And I feel that a lot of people make their college experience out to be a very good one, because you find areas that you will eventually like, or majors that you may change from your freshman year, friends that you may make. So just be reassured that you will make the best of your college experience, no matter if it was the one you had planned for the whole time.
Yeah, so for high school to college, I think it's also I mean, I think a lot of students definitely do visit, but it's also a good idea to figure out, you know, if you like living in the area and things like that. But also in the summer, you could also think about either doing like a shadowing experience, or like, you know, a research lab, work in the research lab, and figure out what you want to do, if it's going to help you in terms of, you know, figuring out what you want to do in college, or pick a college based on your experiences as when you shadow someone. So it might help to figure out those things in the summer, and, you know, try to make a decision based off of that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Those perspectives are like honestly like really helpful, especially for someone like looking at applying to colleges right now, and like, you know, thinking about like kind of like similar goals in mind as well. And kind of like one thing to, I guess, end it off with is like, is there any like change in like, I know you guys talked about, some of you, that you know, you something that you've I guess kept with in the topic of like study or research, or any type of like, you know, being committed to like patient care. Is there anything that like what is that in the field that appeals to you more specifically? Like, I know some of you talked about like doing research in terms of like interacting with people in the actual area, or like, you know, cancer research. Like, what really draws you into that? Is there anything related to that?
Initially, I was incredibly drawn to medicine because I feel that the gratification you get from helping patients, serving patients, finding a diagnosis, creating tools directly relevant to your care was something that initially drew me to medicine. And as it's gone on, I realized that that's more right than ever, especially during rotations. For the first time, I'm getting experience with every day talking to patients, helping patients. And it's definitely confirmed that I want to pursue a career in medicine. Some things that ancillary to medicine that also interested me, as I mentioned, was bioengineering, health policy, data analytics. And initially, when I was in undergrad or high school, I was a little nervous as to if I should pursue that as a separate career, or if I do go into medicine, then I would just be taking patient appointments all day and I can't do anything else, was the perspective that I had. But I realized that even a lot of physicians, if you choose to go the traditional path, can do a lot of things. Like many of them do part-time consulting in VC firms. They work in med tech. They do the MD, PhD path. They may even leave medicine to pursue research full term or pursue a company. They may get involved with anthropology research, like Shravya was saying, health policy. So I think that the freedom also of having an MD, being a physician, helping patients at their core, but eventually being able to do anything that interests me, confirm that this would be the path for me, even though my interests and specialty and ancillary passions kind of change over time.
Okay, I'll go next. So in my case, I've wanted to be a scientist since like early high school. So I've always wanted to be a scientist, but I didn't really know what kind of research I wanted to do. I just thought it was cool holding a pipette, you know, wearing a lab coat. I just thought it was cool. So so yeah, I mean, I did kind of transition from like doing a more chemistry research to doing a more biology research, but as long as you enjoy science, you know, to the core of it, you would really like research. But it's something that, you know, you need to experience it to know if you really like this kind of career or not, to know if it suits you.
And I can go last. I think Bhavana put it really well of like, I think patient care and like having experience working in clinics and being a part of people's like life journey, whether that is like helping deliver a baby or helping someone transition or doing a clinical eval for an migrant who just came in. I think since those are the areas that are interesting to me, like being a direct player in the clinical team and being the one who's able to like really work with patients, figure out what they need. I think there's like no gratification like that, and being able to advocate for patients in that way. And I think also similarly to what Bhavana was saying, like having the flexibility to have a wide variety of different careers down the line, while also always having patient care open was really important to me. I considered many different routes of pursuing like medicine or medicine or like associated careers. And I think the thing that always came back to me was like, I valued most hearing from people making health related decisions, whether that's in tech or policy, if they had experience being like a direct patient care provider. So I knew I wanted that for myself, even if I was going to go down into policy down the line or something different. So I was very, I think for me, it was also just the number of opportunities that having an MD opened up, and the personal like knowledge that I do have patient experience to guide my decisions and what I do in any field.
Yeah, also, before we end off, there's like actually a question in the chat. So someone, it's kind of open-ended, but someone asked, other than research, what outside things did you do to help you get into the medical field? So I guess beyond research and like shadowing, is there anything?
I can start with that. I did no clinical shadowing. I worked as or research. I was very like, I know I want to be a doctor. I know my reasons are strong, but I want to be the doctor I want to be. So I ran a like medical hotline out of a local prison that I still work at, doing like health affidavits for prisoners and helping them get medical care that they need. I like worked on the ground in slums and villages providing gender-based violence support. I also like worked as like a mental health counselor for a long period of time and a sexual assault counselor. So I like showed the same skills that you need and that medicine would give me, which is like patient care, empathy, like decision making, integrating like medical and psychological and social knowledge to be able to drive people's care, but through the topics that I was interested in. And I continue to do that even as I get ready for residency applications and stuff. So yeah, I say that just because I think I did take a kind of different approach and I was not sure it would pan out for me, but thus far it seems all right. We'll see the next step.
Yeah, agreed. Just to kind of like frame the question of like, I think that there's a general perspective that research, shadowing, volunteering, like do all three, be strong in all three to get into med school or to be a pre-med. And that's also not the approach I took. Personally, although I did a few activities in all three, research, just bioengineering and biotech research was my main personal interest. So that is what I did the most of. And I did shadow, I did volunteer, but I don't feel like those were what really spoke or shined on my application. So my advice would be to, while you do have to, just for applications in general, like do a bit of everything, but the one that you actually like the most or you feel you're good at or getting the best opportunities in, just pursue that. And don't be worried about how you don't have 5 volunteering experiences, but you have 7 research experiences. So if research doesn't call your interest, don't do it. Or pick an area of research, maybe that's not wet lab or patient or whatever that actually interests you. Some things that I did outside of research was I did a lot of clubs. Like I started volunteering with like tech and health organizations. I did mentorship for like high school and middle school students when I was in high school. I did some policy research that was not directly health either. It's just like economics of insurance and stuff. in college. As I mentioned, I have an interest in sports medicine. So throughout college, I also did volunteering with disabled athletes. And throughout high school and college, I didn't do many like medical extracurriculars other than research. So I think, and I still ended up doing well in med school or pursuing med school just as well as Shravya is doing too. And so I feel like don't be nervous that you have to hit a checklist or that you have to pursue these activities. It's just important to like pursue your interests and also frame your application at the time in a way that's best suited for the schools you want to get into.
Yeah, in my case, I obviously did research, but I do know of students that haven't done research that got into medical school as well. And it's not as uncommon as you would think. I mean, I've actually a good friend of mine, she did a music degree and then took the MCAT and then ended up in medical school. And she also did think that it helped her in terms of her MCAT scores because she has more time to work on her MCAT. So it's not always like, you know, you don't necessarily have to do the conventional pre-med degrees to get into med school. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, you know, thank you guys for being here today and like all these perspectives. It really helps. Yeah, and that's kind of what we're gonna end it off with. And also feel free to join the rest of the session if you guys would like to. But thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you Shravya, Sirimuvva, and Bhavana for joining the medical panel and speaking in it. And thank you Sneha for moderating it as well. So yeah, I think we're going to transition to our break, which will be for 20 minutes from 12:30 to 12:50. And then we'll introduce our speaker then. So yeah, and you guys are feel free to stay if you want for the break. Thank you.